Just tell us about the mix in your portfolio. You've got hotels and game reserves in South Africa, United Kingdom, and also in Europe.
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I think I just need to give you a little bit of history of how I got into this industry, which I tell my colleagues was a mistake. My background is really transport and construction, which I still have today, and crane hire, which my partner runs very successfully, and he's led me into the leisure industry. Right. And it started with Shamwari Game Reserve, which I think is an icon in South Africa. And I think it really got its hallmark and its reputation through our conservation effort there, which I'll come back to. But I think once I got going and I realized, and I studied the Branson model quite carefully of vertical integration. In other words, get a customer, get his wallet and empty it. So, you know, it started with, you know, then I wanted to get into the travel business, because what I realized when I sort of analyzed where our market was, which was international, considering we're a high-end game reserve, and most of our visitors came through Cape Town. In fact, 99% of our visitors that come to Shamwari come through Cape Town. So it was a case of finding a hotel in Cape Town, and that started with Steenberg, then finding something on the Garden route. And so this sort of development started. And then the UK is our biggest market. So we needed to find something there, and we were very successful in getting some management and marketing contracts, and subsequently a little bit of equity, which hasn't been that easy because of the restraints in us moving capital. Right. It's a lot easier now. And so the whole thing grew. So today we have 43 products in our portfolio, having started 20 years ago with Mantis, Shamwari is a bit of an accident, and it's been an interesting growth pattern. You know, it hasn't just been taking product and hoping for the best. For example, we have 3 products in Chile, but we integrate that with a hotel in Buenos Aires. Why? Because South African Airways flies direct there now. Yeah. Similarly with our European product, right. We have London, we have Paris, and we have south of France, and so on. And then we have probably the 2 extreme products in the world. We have the Ice Hotel in Lapland, and we have a tented camp in Antarctica. So that's the sort of spread of our product now.
Let's talk about things like the Ice Hotel in Lapland and just trying to be relevant, because you've won numerous accolades, and one of them being the leading conservation company and British Airways Tourism for Tomorrow. Many people would argue that ecotourism is essentially tourism for tomorrow, people taking on a greater environmental consciousness. How do you incorporate that in the designs of your hotels and in the considerations of what it is that clients are looking for?
Well, I think you've used a good example there, you know, because of global warming. And a good friend of ours, Lewis Pugh, you know, and he's been very good for us in our product, because, you know, he swam in the Arctic. That mine, he's just been to Mount Everest. So, you know, we use those as, you know, that hotel won't be existing if global warming happens. You won't get a nice experience and we'll lose all the nature in the Antarctic if we carry on like that. But it's an important question that you ask. Obviously with Shamwari and our game reserve products, and we've got stuff in Rwanda, and we've built an incredible camp in a rainforest there on the periphery of a rainforest, where you've got the primates and the chimps, and we've got the gorilla experience and all that. Those are quite easy ones to profile in terms of our conservation effort. But when you come to a city hotel, you take the Draycott in London, you know, how do we profile that? And in actual fact, we won an award the other day for one of the better conservation products. It's quite simple, you know. We look at the waste, we look at the light bulbs, we look at the paper we use, and there's a whole lot of things that we try and put in. And we started a program together with a significant tour operator in this country, Ecotourism, and our foundation, of which I'm the chairman of, the Wilderness Foundation, and we have the Green Leaf product, which goes around all over and grades us. You know, whether you're silver, gold, or platinum. So it started, a grading process has now started, indicating how serious we are about conservation. We're very serious about it.
Okay, now you've also mentioned that you've got hotels in South America, and that raises the whole issue of creating an authentically African product, for instance, in a cosmopolitan and global world, at a time where you're beginning to have entrepreneurs within the leisure space, you know, coming up in countries such as the United Arab Emirates, in China, in Indonesia, in emerging market economies. So you've got serious rivalry for a new market, and serious rivalry for ideas from people who come from these culturally enriched societies as well. How do you do it?
Well, you know, again, I find that a very interesting question, because if you take our African products with our game reserves, that's quite easy. You know, we can be, in fact at Shamari we did it a very different way. We were the first, I didn't just go knock down the homes there. There were some quite prime examples of a Victorian house. Yeah. We've obviously got the natural, what you'd call typical African thatch and that sort of thing. But we looked at conserving. We don't only conserve the land, we conserve buildings, we look after what was there prior to that. So we try and be a little bit different. I mean, when you say cosmopolitan is, you know, we won't just take a building, we respect heritage. We won't just take a building and knock it down and think, but we should put a high-rise there. You know, we have an absolutely exquisite Art Deco, a little hotel in Port Elizabeth. You know, you take the Monarch in Johannesburg, the old post office. You know, we take into account what was there and we try and preserve heritage. So, you know, when we go and you say all these fancy cosmopolitan places like the Middle East and China and all the rest of it, they can build a big concrete jungles. We're not in that business. Ours is very niche. In fact, we've developed a little marketing tool here, is that we believe we have a bucket list of products. And I don't know if any of you saw that movie with Morgan Freeman and, you know, the two guys were dying in bed. And, you know, they had to go and see these things. Jack Nicholson, and that made a great impression on me. We got a bucket list of products. You need to go and see some of these. Before you die, okay. Well, I'm not saying because there's quite a lot to go and see, so you need a bit of time.
All right, you mentioned the word niche, and I think that's quite important because we had this conversation earlier on with David Bullard, is do niche products survive post the recession? And with people fearing a possible double dip, there is the whole question of affordability. How have you survived the global recession and the credit crisis?
That we've looked at as an opportunity. I agree with David. I don't think it's a V in the economy. I think it's a W. We've seen the dip and we've come up, and I think there's another dip. And that's the opportunity, because what we found is with these niche small products, it's not easy to go out there and market on your own. You need to be part of a group. You need to identify yourself with a grouping. And we'd like to think that we're a unique group, and we get calls. And we have 4 models in our stable now. The preferable one is we've got equity in the product and we market and manage. We also market and manage. We also market, but we're very careful on that. I've got to know the owner and make sure our standards aren't compromised in any way. And then we have a badging operation where you can put our Mantis badge on it, which signifies certain standards, and you go and see that. So we are niche, and we've the opportunities out of the recession is that we're getting people coming to us to say, look, can you help us? We need to be identified in this huge global market.
Ulrich, just your views on this one. We were saying that tourism is probably the greatest job creator in Africa if you look at the entire tourism value chain. During the good times, it constituted something like 8% of GDP, but we've also seen tourism really needing to survive the crisis of the credit crisis because many travelers were not coming in from Europe. Many people couldn't afford the flights, etc. Countries like Kenya, that are heavily dependent on tourism, have not had to innovate and focus on the domestic tourism market because internationally that clientele is dwindling.
You know, I'm of the opinion that if we look at the South African situation and the competitiveness of this economy into the future, we've spoken about the next 20 years and have said we have to revise our plans every year. But if we look at the future, then I'm of the opinion that the tourism industry is actually the industry on which we have to concentrate, in which we can really be competitive in South Africa. You know, if we look at the textile industry, can we really compete? The car industry, can we really compete with the people from the Far East? But we can compete with the tourism and the product that these people are offering to the international clients. You
use the word competitive, and Adrian, I'd like to get your views here. Ahead of the World Cup, there were all sorts of issues around inflated prices for hotels, for airlines, etc., etc. And many people were saying the problem with South Africa is that it's constantly being marketed as an expensive tourism destination, whereas it should be an offbeat, unique tourism destination. And that's the problem, is we're just a little bit too expensive a destination for an emerging market economy.
Well, I think you've got to start, where do our tourists come from? And our biggest opportunity, and I never refer to a problem in life, is that our airlift is not competitive. You know, when you think you can fly to South America, you can fly to other exotic destinations from international countries at probably 1/3 of our price. That, in my opinion, and I don't know how we're going to overcome that, but that is an issue when you've got our market. Secondly is that, I know that Ulrich talked about it earlier, one of our huge difficulties at the moment is the strength of our rand relative to other. We're probably the greatest emerging economy in the world, but we're paying the price for that now. I mean, we're a resource-driven economy and we're a tourist-driven economy. At the moment, we are no longer that competitive. So it's had an effect on our market in that people are seeing us as no longer an inexpensive destination when the pound was 15 and the rand was the rand dollar was 10 and 11. It made a huge difference to us. In fact, we did an analysis the other day of where we were 3 years ago and where we are now relative to how we've increased our prices, what's happened to the currency. And it's a vast difference to that person that was coming 3 years ago that's coming now. So this is an issue. And plus the fact that we've had margin creep in our business. We've had to put up wages. Power has been put up, electricity, fuel. So it's a tough market that we're in at the moment.
Okay, final question. We've got the Eurozone crisis that's unfolded right now in Southern Europe and the volatility of the Europe and austerity measures in Europe, and people are going to have their wages cut, etc. So we can almost say over the next year, probably not looking at Europe as a source for travelers or as an investment destination. In terms of your future plans, because you've got so much exposure to Europe, how are you going to get around that problem and what are you looking forward to do?
I'm glad you asked that question. What we've recognized is that there's an incredible African market, especially South African market. And our traditional market, 7 months of the year is international based. And if we look at our income base, 70% of our income comes from the international market. But there's a 50-50 in our customer base because of our promotions in the winter months. So what we've done now, we've decided that we've got to get a sales force into this economy. And we haven't got that. So we're about to announce a massive agreement with a big operation in this country who has 70% of their market in this country. So instead of us going to invent the wheel, I've never got time for that, we found somebody that's got a huge, they're accessing corporate, government, markets that we're not in. So we're recognizing, because of the fact of what you've said about Europe and the States and everywhere else, we've got to access our local market and quickly.